This video features the installation of our 225 Mod Twin HD Sprung Street Kit. However, kits are available in different configurations based on the torque being produced at the crankshaft and your style of driving. The installation procedure will be the same except for the friction assemblies and monodrive hubs being used. While we try to get all aspects of the removal and installation of our clutch and flywheel on video, there may be some items we may have missed. This video is made to provide the basics on how to replace a clutch and flywheel and is in no way intended to replace a factory service manual. Please note that our test vehicle has been modified with a large single turbo, a custom exhaust, and did not have any of the service hole covers on the transmission or the panels and tunnel reinforcements under the vehicle. Because of this, your removal and installation steps may vary. Please visit our website for a complete listing of kits for this application. Disconnect the negative cable from the battery and move it away from the terminal to assure it will not make accidental contact. Unfasten the electrical connectors to the starter. Then unbolt and remove the starter. Now unbolt and remove the slave cylinder from the bell housing and move it out of the way. Do not break open the hydraulic line. Inside the vehicle, remove the shift lever knob and pull up the center console panel assembly. Unplug the electrical connectors and then remove the center console panel assembly. Unfasten and pull up the rubber insulator. Unbolt and remove the shift lever assembly. Make sure to cover the hole so that nothing falls inside the transmission. Unfasten the center section of the exhaust and remove it from under the vehicle. With a stand under the differential to prevent it from dropping down, unbolt and remove the power plant frame. Remove the drain plug at the bottom of the transmission and drain the transmission fluid. Reinstall the plug using a new washer and tighten it to 29 to 43 foot-pounds. Unfasten the flange at the rear of the drive shaft and remove the drive shaft from under the vehicle. Unbolt and remove the downpipe. Separate the release bearing from the pressure plate. Do this by swinging the release fork so that the release bearing is pushed toward the pressure plate. Do this either from the service hole at the driver's side of the transmission or the hole where the slave cylinder was removed. Then, insert a screwdriver through the service hole at the bottom of the bell housing. Place the blade of the screwdriver into the space between the release bearing and the wedge collar. Pry and separate the release bearing from the wedge collar. If this doesn't work for you, unbolt the pressure plate from the flywheel. You will have to loosen each bolt individually through the service hole and rotate the engine to line up each bolt. Unfasten the bracket from the left rear of the transmission. Unplug the electrical connectors and disengage the harness from the transmission. Place a jack under the transmission and remove all the bell housing bolts. Separate the transmission from the engine and remove the transmission from under the vehicle. Unbolt and remove the old pressure plate and disc. Unbolt and remove the old flywheel. Remove the release fork and release bearing from the transmission. Clean off any dirt, grime, or grease from the guide tube, input shaft splines, and the release fork. Lightly coat the guide tube and the pivot areas of the release fork with a Ceram lube included with your clutch kit. Place the release bearing onto the release fork and install the bearing and fork assembly onto the transmission. Tighten the bolts to 24 to 33 foot-pounds. Lightly coat the input shaft and pilot with the Ceram lube. Check the release fork for proper operation. Place a small amount of Ceram lube in between the release bearing tabs and the clutch fork. Slide the hub assembly onto the input shaft and work the Ceram lube into the splines. Then remove the hub assembly and wipe off any excess lube to prevent contamination of the friction assemblies. Remove the old seal and pilot bearing from the crankshaft. Carefully install a new pilot bearing followed by a new seal. Mount the flywheel using new flywheel attachment bolts. Tighten the bolts until they are snug and then torque the bolts in a star pattern to 48 foot-pounds. Make sure to clean the friction surface area with some sort of non-petroleum based cleaner. Set the Mod Twin assembly in position and install the bolts to hold it in place. Make sure the hub is aligned, snug the bolts, and remove the alignment tool. Then torque the bolts in a star pattern to 25 foot-pounds. Lift the transmission back into place and support it with a jack. Install the bell housing bolts, making sure to install any ground straps that may have been removed, and then tighten the bolts to 28 to 38 foot-pounds. Through the service hole, push the release cylinder end of the release fork towards the transmission. And making sure the monolock is pushed into the pressure plate, engage the release bearing into the monolock collar. The release bearing should snap into the monolock collar when installed properly. Install the slave cylinder and tighten the hardware to 12 to 15 foot-pounds. Install the harness back onto the transmission. Reconnect the electrical connectors and install the bracket at the left rear of the transmission. Place the drive shaft in place and then install and tighten the hardware to 37 to 43 foot-pounds. Remove the fill plug on the upper left side of the transmission. Fill the transmission with the vehicle manufacturer's specified type and amount of fluid. Install the fill plug and tighten it. Set the power plant frame into position, then install the hardware. Tighten the nuts to 109 to 130 foot-pounds and the single horizontal bolt to 55 to 68 foot-pounds. At this point, the stand under the differential can be removed. Install the downpipe back into position, tighten the hardware, and reconnect the O2 sensor plug. Install the center section of the exhaust and tighten the hardware. Place the starter back into position. Install and tighten the hardware to 28 to 38 foot-pounds. Then attach the electrical connections to the starter. Inside the vehicle, make sure to remove anything you may have used to cover the hole, then install the shift lever assembly and tighten the 3 bolts to 6 to 9 foot-pounds. Place the rubber insulator into position, then install and tighten the 4 nuts to secure it. Reconnect the electrical connectors and then install the center console panel assembly. Install the shift lever knob. Reconnect the negative cable to the battery. For more information on our products or the parts featured in this video, please visit our website in the description below. Thank you for watching.